reading this body of work made me look back also, because the first several books in your poetry life, in them there's a great sense of possibility, political possibility, maybe hope even with regards to anti-colonial movements. And when I think back to the beginning of my own activism in the 80s, it was different than yours in the sense that I think yours was deeply rooted in political analysis, where when I was young, I think it was purely affective for me, motivated by emotion. And I didn't really gain any great sense of analysis for many decades after that. But
Mhm.
reading your poems from that period, I think back to my own life, and I think back to the anti-nuclear movement at the time, the anti-apartheid movement, to CISPIS on our campus, the Committee in Solidarity with the People of El Salvador, which was being monitored by the CIA, and the campus office was bugged. And I lived for a year in Central America in the 80s as a teenager, and being really impacted by the 10th anniversary of the Sandinista, some of the celebrations. I bring this up because for me, this early activism felt full of possibility
Mhm.
in a way your early books remind me of. Yet I also have trouble separating that period in activist history from my age. Did it feel like a different future was possible because of the moment at hand, historically speaking, out in the world? Or did it feel that way because I was young and these were my first experiences and I hadn't yet accumulated a mounting set of failures and setbacks and foreclosure? So I guess I wonder, it made me wonder about
Yeah.
you. What is your sense of that time when you look back? How much would you connect this sense of possibility in these early books to your time of life versus the time of life of the world?
Ah, I see. I hear you. I think both those things are true in some senses, but I think concretely, I did live through some very important, crucial political movements, some periods of, sparkling, as there are now too, yeah, political ideas. And in terms of the development of the world, those were possible, right? Those were possible, and people worked toward them. The anti-colonial movement, the anti-apartheid movement, the feminist movement, the gay liberation struggles movement. Uh, those happened. Let us say they didn't just happen because I was younger. They actually
Right.
happened.
Yes.
There were incredible activism toward it, and they confronted the power structures of the day and discombobulated them in serious ways, right? Of course, what became of some of the demands of those movements were kind of co-opted into a system and given back to us in ways that that system could absorb, right?
Mhm.
So we had sort of how should I say it? We had half of what we wanted, or a quarter of what we wanted, was thrown back at us. Yeah, but those movements did exist and had a potency at the moment that we were living them. I remember being, here in Toronto, out on the streets demonstrating against apartheid in South Africa, and having, you know, great connections with other activists around the world, in that struggle. And something happened out of those movements. Yeah,
Right.
something happened. Something was enabled out of those movements. Or, for example, the struggle for choice. For women's right to be human and control their own, have sovereignty over their own bodies. And I remember being out on the street here in Toronto too in those struggles, and those struggles succeeded, however, partially all over the world, right? The movements, the ideas that I then transformed into poetry, if you will, um, I felt and lived through them at the time. And they were they were so sharp that the power structures in the world had to take notice of them, and did, and moved, but either moved to co-opt or to curtail or to somehow incorporate as a sign of their having taken notice of them and knowing that it would be dangerous not to address them, but only addressing them insofar as the system could continue to do that work. And so the radical edges of those movements were somehow blunted, right?
Yeah.
And even more so, we could see in certain kinds of situations, not just blunted, but people were imprisoned and killed for those things, right? People were imprisoned and killed for those things. Someone said a long time ago, and I can't remember, that if one were to think of, let's say, the radical Black movement in the United States and what happened in the late 60s, 70s, in terms of its confrontation with the police and the CIA, et cetera, that if you were to think about the elimination of all those people, it would be similar to the elimination of an entire government, right? If you think of what happened to Black radicals in the US in that moment. So when we arrive at the moment after, it isn't, in a sense, and I write this somewhere in a text, I think, in Land to Light On. In a war, one gets defeated. You know what I mean? One gets defeated. It's not that one's ideas are defeated, but the incredible amount of energy of the state against those ideas and against the people who generate those ideas, that is also happening. It's not merely that we didn't try enough or work enough or think enough or any of those things. You get beat up, right? And then you have to kind of, go underground again and come back again, right? With that knowledge.
You moved to Canada in 1970 and have lived there largely since. But for 1 year in 1983, you moved to Grenada to support the People's Revolutionary Government. And you end up being there when the United States invades and topples that government. And on paper, you'd think Grenada was an unlikely target. Its main product was not oil or precious metals, but nutmeg. From what I've read, its naval fleet consisted of 10 fishing trawlers at the time. There wasn't a single stoplight in the entire country. And its population was less than Peoria, Illinois. But the Zinn Education Project uses a phrase from Noam Chomsky's when they say Grenada was the threat of a good example, that it needed to be removed as an inspiration for another way to be. And I wondered if you could speak to what drew you there, what you encountered there, that despite the trauma of the 5-day invasion, despite the disappointment of returning to Canada, that made you characterize it 11 years later in your essay collection, Bread Out of Stone, as the best year of your life at that point in 94.
Yeah. I was a socialist, and I wanted to go and work in a socialist state. And I say was, but I am. And I wanted to go and live where my energies and my hopes were, in a space where that was possible, where it was possible to kind of work each day with your politics, as opposed to against a certain politic. Yeah. Of course, the big world was the against, but and this small place, the place where there was an attempt to make a socialist revolution against a dreadful dictatorship, which the New Jewel movement had brought down that year. And many internationalists went to work in Grenada to Um, and yes, it was against the possibility of a good example. And there I also worked with a lot of other people from up and down the archipelago who were also involved in trying to create socialist spaces, states. And so, as I said, I simply wanted to go work where my politics were, where that was the starting point. And it was a wonderful year of living, despite the ending. Um, I sat in rooms where the people from the Ministry of Finance were talking with just regular people about, like, what do we do? Do we do more sugar? Do we do more? It was just, and the relationships and the relations that the New Jewel movement tried to have with just people on the ground, very personal, communal relations involving people in decisions about the economy. Um, and so that is what drew me there, the possibility of that, and then and to see its execution in a way, right? Um, yeah, it's always very difficult for me to talk about it. It's so strange. It's so many years later. But I woke up each morning and went to work with open heart and open hands.
Yeah.
you know.
Well,
Yeah.
I picked out three three early brief poems I was hoping you'd read. I was thinking Canto 14 from Primitive Offensive, October 19th, 1983 from Chronicles of the Hostile Sun, and then Return from No Language is Neutral.
Canto 14. Naked skin woman, run, legs to silence, bush to water, to snakes evanescent, legs to dark water, tree unscaled, run, moss to creeping liana. Nothing grows here, nothing except everything, so green it blacks, so green it thinks of crevices to moist on, to ponder things fecund, full breasts of things. Naked skin woman, run. Here I am, rough and green as it were, brutal as they come, grubby as usual. Where is my battle shoe? One boot and a bead for my navel. It's all I need. Here my shale skin, battle dress, green jacket, protect me. Here again, sister dust, comrade water. Here I am, ugly and ready. Hand down my juju, my life stone, sister clay. Wet me with some water. Dash my breasts over my shoulders. Come, sister, hold me back. Parry, enemy. Naked skin woman dance, run belly, full of wind. I dance, run. My arms then eloquent wisps, worn over this shawl of a face. Something of a poised mantis, so poised turned to wood, wooden pall for a cracked face that met itself in the look of 1,000,000 coral. Naked woman run. Good day, sister death. Let us get drunk. Let us eat roses, let us eat newspapers. What will it matter? Here I am, mercifully bare. Prop up my elbows, my battle points. Throw water on my face. Give me rum. Show me the dog. Let me at him, Hungan. Prepare my beer. Put sticks and spit. My back is like iron. There's blood on my forehead. Put a cloth to my temples. Come, sister, hold my cowrie. Parry, enemy. Naked woman run. Aloneness comes. In the end, it covers ground quickly. But to be a bright and violent thing, to tear up that miserable sound in my ear, I run. My legs can keep going. My belly is wind. October 19th, 1983. This poem cannot find words. This poem repeats itself. Maurice is dead. Jackie is dead. Uni is dead. Vincent is dead. Dream is dead. Lesser and greater. Dream is dead in these Antilles. Windward, leeward. Maurice is dead. Jackie is dead. Uni is dead. Vincent is dead. Dream is dead. I deny this poem. There isn't a hand large enough to gesture this tragedy, let alone these words. Dead insists itself on us. A glue of blood sticks the rest together. Some are dead. The others will not mourn, most wait for the death announcements. Maurice is dead. Jackie is dead. Uni is dead. Vincent is dead. Dream is dead, lesser and greater. Dream is dead in these Antilles. Windward, leeward, reality will die. I refuse to watch faces. Back once again. Betrayal again. Ships again. Manacles again. Some of us sold each other. Bracelets, undecorative and unholy. Back to God. I cannot believe the sound of your voice any longer. Blindfolded and manacled, stripped. Bernard, Phyllis, Owusu, H.A., what now? Back to jails in these Antilles. Back to shackles, back to slavery. Dream is dead, lesser and greater, drowned and buried, windward, leeward, a dirge sung forever and in flesh. 3 armored personnel carriers. How did they feel? Shot, shut across Lucas Street. This fratricide, this hot day. How did they feel? Murdering the revolution, skulking back along the road, the people watchful, the white flare, the shots, the shot, the people running, jump, flying, the fort, fleeing. What rumor, not true. Please, rearrested, not dead. Maurice is dead. At 9:30 p.m. the radio. Jackie's dead. 9:30 p.m. the radio. Dream is dead. In these Antilles. How do you write tears? It is not enough. Too much. Our mouths reduced, informed by grief. Windward, leeward. It is only October 19th, 1983. And dream is dead in these Antilles. Return. Return 1. So the street is still there, still melting with sun, still the shining waves of heat at 1 o'clock, the eyelashes scorched, staring the distance of the park to the parade stand, still razor grass burnt and cropped, everything made indistinguishable from dirt by age and custom, whitewashed, and the people. Still, I suppose, the scorpion orchid by the road, that fine red tongue of flamboyant and orange lips muzzling the air, that green plum turning fat and crimson, still the crazy bougainvillea fancying and nettling itself, purple, pink, red, white, still the trickle of sweat and cold flush of heat raising the smell of cotton and skin. Still the dank rank of breadfruit milk, their bash and rain on steps. Still the bridge this side, the sea that side, the rotting ship, barnacle-eaten, still the butcher's blood staining the walls of the market. The ascent of hills, stony and breathless. The dry yellow patches of earth still threaten to swamp at the next deluge. So the road, that stretch of sand and pitch struggling up, glimpses, sea, village, earth, barefooted, hot, women, worried, still the faces masked in sweat and sweetness, still the eyes watery, ancient, still the hard, distinct, brittle smell of slavery.
It feels like Grenada ripples forward in your work through many books of both prose and poetry. But when you read October 19th, 1983, which is the date of the invasion of Grenada by the United States, with your cataloging, your listing of people you knew who were murdered, I wonder if this was the origin of your interest in inventory, something that is a through line, I think, all the way to the contemporary moment, not just in the book Inventory, which also lists deaths and bombings, whether Iraqi dead or Katrina, or all the plants and flowers in Thirsty, which could seem as a counterbalance to the listing of death, but given the ecological death we're all racing towards, seems also to speak to death, or at least now it does. Or ossuaries, which rejects verbs so that we are with and among things, that situates us in an isness of things and material and bones. Or the Blue Clerk, where the clerk is cataloging everything the author withholds and doesn't write. And also the way the whole book, The Blue Clerk, is re-indexed at the end, a wayward index, to borrow Saidiya Hartman's word, but also her sentiment about this index, that relists the book into new relations of form, language, color, plant and insect life, the human, the nation, the archive. Even your most recent novel, Theory, has an inventory of the lovers who prevent the protagonist from completing their thesis. And your book Inventory ends with the line, "I have nothing soothing to tell you. That's not my job. My job is to revise and revise this bristling list hourly." So I was hoping maybe you could talk to us about listing Inventory, maybe both its origin and its enduring, it as an enduring quality within your poetry.
I think you're right. Perhaps that business of inventory begins there. And it begins there because after that, what was a kind of cataclysmic event, not simply personally, yes, because certainly for me, I could leave, as I say in some of those poems. I at least could leave. Many people couldn't. But it was cataclysmic, I thought, for the region and for a lot of Black radical work in the Americas. In a way, it was symbolic of that. So the fall of the revolution in Grenada was symbolic for the possibilities of socialist revolution in the whole region, in the whole of the Americas, and I mean South, Central, etc. Right? There was the fall or the disruption of much kind of socialist work and governance across that whole region. It was, in a sense, the taking back, the reimposition or the verification of U.S. imperialism in North, South, Central America and the archipelago. And so there was a certain kind of idea that came to a halt, right? The suffering didn't come to a halt. The suffering increased. But the great apparatus, the great sort of US imperialist apparatus was put into action against this very small place and this very small idea. And what it said to everyone was, not even that, not even as small as that. You won't even get anything as small as that. Yeah. And so I looked at this as a writer, and I thought, what is it that I might do here now? I mean, and I think that, I've always thought of myself as a writer who follows, who listens, who accounts. Yeah. And I thought, what is my job now? And my job is to take note, right? To take note, to notice, to account, to write down what is happening, to list, yes, to make an inventory of what is gone, what exists now. I won't even go so far as to say what is possible, because at that moment it's not what is possible, but just to be the recorder of the time. Yeah. And so that became my act of survival in a way,
Yeah.
right? My act of survival, and to try to also have the materials of people's desires survive in that also. So when I come to, let's say, inventory, the book, and inventory is written at the time of the Gulf Wars, right? And I'm thinking at that moment, when let's say Baghdad is being bombed, Baghdad was a city of 5 million people. And I live in a city of about, 4 or 5 million people. I'm thinking, like, what happens to the daily? Someone must account for this. Someone must write this down. And while Baghdad seems, on our maps on CNN and ABC and wherever, as a big spot where some terrible ideas being wiped out, we are given to believe there are actually like 5 million individual souls trying to do a day, like trying to live a day, trying to experience a day, trying to get through this horrible day. And the kind of televisual distance which we are allowed living in North America from these events, whether they happen in a city of 5 million or in a small country of 100,000, because it is happening so far away. And I thought, well, okay, my job is to like make a list of what those are, what the small daily thing is in any given life, right? And that meets up for me with what I think I need to write as a Black writer about the small daily life of Black people that is constantly being overpowered by the kind of regime of racism. Yeah. So I need to breathe into that life and take and record every second of it, and not only its demise, right? Not only the terror that it is subjected to, but its acts of willingness, it's acts of openness, it's acts of joy, it's acts of whatever. Do you know what I mean? To reclaim that full day. And so my job, it seems to me, is to notice every aspect of that day and to record it. Yeah.
Well, I love how the Blue Clerk, your Ars Poetica, which is about the tension of between what is written or said and what is not written or not said, what is withheld. I love that you've withheld that collection from the collected poems. Um,
Yes.
in the Blue Clerk, you quote Gilles Deleuze, who says, "Elegy is one of the principal sources of poetry, the great complaint. The complaint is, what's happening to me overwhelms me, not simply that I am in pain, but what has taken away my power of action overwhelms me. And why do I see these things? Why do I know these things? Why must I endure seeing and knowing?" And then the author character in this book talks about inventory being a useful technique for a poet when overwhelmed, to not just conduct an inventory, but to inventory what overwhelms, which to me is interesting when I think of you saying that the listing isn't about possibility, which I think is true. But paradoxically, I wonder if by listing, what overwhelms, by listing as a technique to confront being overwhelmed by a limited power of action, if somehow that does create possibility.
I guess the record adds up
Yeah.
to something. Yeah. And that is I can't use the word hope, but the intention, or that is a possible end of the record, that it adds up, that it accumulates, not so much adds up, but accumulates into a life, into an opening of some kind, right? But I hesitate to use the word hope because it's such a discredited word.
Yeah.
Such a discredited word. It's so used by, you know, liberal democracies to characterize the lives and desires of actually the peoples who it excludes from its joys,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I hate that word because we are always expected to have it. Why? Why should I have it? We actually live in hopelessness. So what is this? Um, Sorry, I've gone somewhere else. Tell me, bring me back, bring me back.
Well, I was hoping we could leap ahead from your earliest poetry to hear a section of something more recent. What I was hoping we could hear is Ossuary number 3, a book written in the voice of the fugitive Yasmin.
Ossuary 3. I loved and lived, as I said, for a time, looking up from water like seashells. I arrived where the sonorous oceans took me. Washed and washed. Coral overcame my feet, my hands, the shocks of immobility, the stung tendons, the clamped Achilles, the enamel vocal cords. I did well, they say, given the circumstances. The spiked municipalities ration their handouts of free breads, free bicycles, free bracelets, free sugars, free plastics, free razor blades, free bullets, free coverings, free enclosures, free fences, free, absolutely free freeness. Still, they required performances. One needed licenses and stamped forms and masks and stickers and, worst of all, transparent veins. To be frank, most of my time was spent sleeping in one courthouse or another, defending charges of one thing and another. Larcenies, robberies, trespassing, loitering, intimidation, resisting arrest, vagrancy. But fundamentally, existence. I took my case everywhere, naturally, all continents, several unknown galaxies, some as yet unarmed moons, needless to say, nameless to count, the prodigious silence, the thunderclaps of salutary ignorance. So, as I said, momentous, ravenous, ugly times. I am aware how this looks, like pins and fractile glass, and after a time anyone could see the futile jurisdictions and all my waterlogged paper. Lived and loved. Common oxymoron. If I have lived, I have not loved. And if I have loved, I cannot have lived. It was difficult to live and love at the same time, you see what I mean? Since to live is to be rapacious as claws, to have the most efficient knives and broken beer bottles, needles, powers of attorney, nonchalance, indifference, negligence. To love is an impediment to this hard business of living, so I cannot have loved, not me. Do not think this of me. Do not think I did not try to breach the fluorescent streets, to admit the long disillusioned sandbanks. Do not think it. I rented secretive rooms to see what it was like. No denying, I spread prickling sheets on narrowing beds, stretched out beside one person and then another. The night dew we collected at our throats, cackling. The cardamom aroma of our breaths. The cinnamon we rubbed in our hands before touching. The basil leaves with which we covered ourselves, obviously. My rainy, rainy eyes, my earth-filled hair. All this I brought across sticky bitumen highways to the dim-lit, ambiguous approaches of these stanzas, their permanences, their impermanences, we wore in our heavy, heavy coats. The dried lavender flowers I crushed in my palms before opening the doors, my coastal limbs carrying shells and seaweeds, the full ocean in my mouth. Oh, I longed for the deepest, suicidal blue waters. I craved the seas where what was on earth could not scar me. I gave all this to lovers. I gave them to my glasses. We looked through windows from hotels, off freeways, off the industrial parks, off garbage dumps. We saw demolitions that stung our eyes roomy. Indefinable liquids passed through our indefinable souls. Here I am then. Goodbye, again and again. How we left these rooms fully clothed twigs and branded bones again. Do not say it was my fault. Do not say I could have gathered blue dragonflies or the showering sunlight, the ashes of volcanoes or the residue of songs from the cups of saxophones. I could not have raised ferned cadavers, thistles, tabebue rosea, and thurium horses. Could not. Tribes of tigers and ginger lily, cartridges. I tried love. I did. The scapulae I kissed. I did. The flat triangular bones I filled with kisses. Spumes of kisses, gutters of kisses, postponed kisses, and early newborn kisses. The curve of clavicles, I dug artesian wells of kisses there, utensils of kisses, spoons of kisses, basins of kisses, creeks of kisses. The jugular notch I ate in kisses, I devoured in kisses, teeth-filled kisses, throat-filled kisses, gullet-stuffed kisses. So don't tell me how love will rescue me. I was carnivorous about love. I ate love to the ankles, my thighs are gnawed with love. Still and yet, I cannot have loved, since living was all I could do, and for that I was caged in bone spur endlessly. Eye sockets ambushed me. I slept with harassment and provocations, though I wanted to grow lilacs. Who wouldn't? To know the secrets of spiders. Who wouldn't? Yet the rumors of newspapers persisted. The pained sighs of the waiting rooms of existence were called good music. I could not leave my house without plans. A perfect stranger's thought and bone would sprout on my heart like a lantern trapping a light.
We've been listening to Dionne Brand read from her latest collection, Nomenclature, New and Collected Poems.